everybody, it's Miss Amy, and as I promised at the end of the Indian in the Cupboard, I'm here to start Roald Dahl's James and the Giant Peach. This is another one of the books that I can remember my teacher reading to me when I was a young girl, and I loved it. There's a movie made out of it. Most of Roald Dahl's books have become movies, and you've probably heard of them: BFG, Matilda, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. So those are all Roald Dahl's books. Now, when you buy one of Roald Dahl's books, 10% of it goes to a charity that helps children. It just goes to some charity. So that's a great thing. And he has a website, www.roalddahl.com. So let's look at this book a little bit closer. Now remember, I own this book, but I don't own the rights to this book. I just am thankful I get to share it with you. So we, of course, have Roald Dahl as our author. It says right here, illustrated by Quentin Blake. Now look at that picture right there. And let's move down and let's look at the title, James and the Giant Peach. Boys and girls, do you think you can maybe figure out who the story's about, the main character, just by the name? And maybe some of the other supporting characters that are in this book? And what do you think maybe the story's about? It says James and the Giant Peach. We're just going to have to dig on in and crack this spine so we can figure out what this book is all about. Boys and girls, I always recommend you read the book, or in this case, listen to it, before you watch the movie. I personally love movies, but I've always thought that the book was better than the movie. So, and I'm not saying it's a bad movie, I'm just saying I prefer the book. Chapter 1. Until he was 4 years old, James Henry Trotter had a happy life. He lived peacefully with his mother and father in a beautiful house beside the sea. There were always plenty of other children for him to play with, and there was the sandy beach for him to run about on, and the ocean to paddle in. It was the perfect life for a small boy. Would you like to live by the sea? We know that James was happy at first, don't we? Let's see what happens next. Then one day, James's mother and father went to London to do some shopping. And there, a terrible thing happened. But both of them suddenly got eaten up in full daylight, mind you, and on a crowded street by an enormous, angry rhinoceros, which had escaped from the London Zoo. My goodness, there's so many tragic ways that people can die, but could you imagine a family being eaten up by rhinoceroses in the city? That's very strange. Now, this, as you can well imagine, was rather a nasty experience for two such gentle parents. But in the long run, it was far nastier for James than it was for them. Their troubles were all over in a jiffy. They were dead and gone in 35 seconds flat. Poor James, on the other hand, was still very much alive, and all at once he found himself alone and frightened in a vast, unfriendly world. The lovely house by the seaside had to be sold immediately, and the little boy, carrying nothing but a small suitcase containing a pair of pajamas and a toothbrush, was sent away to live with his two aunts. Their names were Aunt Sponge and Aunt Spiker. Now, those are some weird names. And I'm sorry to say that they were both really horrible people. They were selfish and lazy and cruel, and right from the beginning they started beating poor James for almost no reason at all. They never called him by his real name, but always referred to him as, "You disgusting little beast," or "You filthy nuisance," or "You miserable creature." And they certainly never gave him any toys to play with or any picture books to look at. His room was bare as a prison cell. They lived, Aunt Sponge, Aunt Spiker, and now James as well, in a queer ramshackle house on the top of a high hill in the south of England. Oh, look, this book is taking us to England too, just like the Indian in the cupboard. Now, boys and girls, it says they lived in a queer ramshackle house. Queer just means peculiar, strange, maybe different. Not sure what ramshackle means. You might have to look that one up. The hill was so high that for almost anywhere in the garden, James could look down and see for miles and miles across a marvelous landscape of woods and fields. And on a very clear day, if he looked in the right direction, he could see a tiny gray dot far away on the horizon, which was the house that he used to live in with his beloved mother and father. And just beyond that, he could see the ocean itself, a long, thin streak of blackish blue, like a line of ink beneath the rim of the sky. But James was never allowed to go down off the top of the hill. Here's a picture. I think there'll be more pictures in this book than there was in the Indian in the Cupboard, but there's still going to be black and white, boys and girls. So you see here, this is the house. Here's a tree. It drops off. I'm assuming that's the ocean, unless it's somewhere over here. No, those are more trees and hills. You can see mountains in the background. Neither Aunt Sponge nor Aunt Spiker could ever be bothered to take him out herself, not even for a small walk or a picnic, and he certainly wasn't permitted to go alone. "The nasty little beast will only get into mischief if he goes out of the garden," Aunt Spiker had said, and terrible punishments were promised him, such as things locked up in the cellar with rats for a week, if he even so much as dared to climb over the fence. The garden, which covered the whole of the top of the hill, was large and desolate, and the only tree in the entire place, apart from a clump of dirt, old laurel bushes at the far end, was an ancient peach tree that never gave any peaches. Did you know that there's trees that don't give off fruit? Some of them just make flowers. Some of them don't do either. There was no swing, no seesaw, no sandpit, and no other children were ever invited to come up the hill to play with poor James. There wasn't as much as a dog, woof, or a cat, meow, around to keep him company. And as time went on, he became sadder and sadder, and more lonely, and he used to spend hours every day standing at the bottom of the garden, gazing wistfully at the lovely but forbidden world of the woods, and fields and ocean that was spread out below them like a magic carpet. Boys and girls, these chapters are going to be much smaller, which is probably a good thing, because then you don't have to listen to me as long. Here is poor James standing by the garden. And this actually concludes chapter 1. So I look forward to finding out more about James tomorrow when we get to read chapter 2. I hope you've enjoyed the beginning of that book, and I hope that I've gripped at you just a little bit. I think we can tell by this chapter, James is indeed our main character. So boys and girls, I look forward to reading more of Roald Dahl's James and the Giant Peach with you tomorrow. If you're listening or watching this before bedtime, good night. Sleep tight.